Hello, everyone. It's Charlene Lee here. And today I have a very fun episode about all things technology. So, the last time we talked, I was talking about building custom AI models. And I realized that I should probably lay out a broader platform for how to think about AI technology. And in particular, how do you build it so it's not going to be obsolete in just 2 years? So that's what I really want to talk about today. And if you're joining live, I would love for you to share in the comments, and also just share in the comments if you're listening to this afterwards. Please share your biggest challenge when it comes to AI technology right now. And I would love to hear what are you grappling with? What are the biggest challenges? How are you thinking about it, especially not just in the way that you're using it, but how your organization is starting to use it. And one of the things that I'll talk about today is how do you deal with the fact that it's constantly changing? There again are all these new agentic AI. Some of it's working, some of it's still just vaporware, but it's all coming. So how do you keep your systems and your platforms at a place where it can be updated? And yet, how do you build something when you know it's going to have to change? So today I'm going to be I have a bunch of slides available. Let me try to get them to the place where they need to be. All right, here we go. So again, just how do we build platforms that are not going to be obsolete in 2 years? And I also have the slides available. So if you'd like to follow along with them, they'll be at bit.ly/building AI platforms. All right, let's get into this here today. So my main point here today is that we oftentimes think of technology as something, especially if you're a non-technology person. Like I don't know how to code very well or at all. Basically, I don't understand how to build these things. I've tried my hand at vibe coding, and it's just really hard to do. And so when it comes to technology choices, a lot of leaders are delegating that to IT. And my biggest point today is that leadership decisions are not a technology decision. It is not something that IT decides. I do believe very strongly, and again, this is built on decades now experience, is that technology choices are leadership decisions. So, how are we going to serve customers? How are we going to adapt to all of these changes that are happening, not just in technology, but in our society? How are we going to differentiate from our customers? And a part of that, a big part of that is how are we going to use technology to give ourselves a competitive advantage so that we can win? And so leaders provide the why and what matters. And then the technology department, the engineering teams bring the how. How are we going to do it? And what I'm seeing right now in particular is that AI is being, the whole entire area is being given to our IT departments. And they go figure out what it is, go create an AI strategy. And I heard this beautiful quote that AI is a tool. It should not be the first word in the strategy. So it's not about having an AI strategy, it's like having a telephone strategy. AI is the tool to help you accomplish your business strategy. So today, I want to talk about how do you think about the technology choices of AI in a way that you, as a non-technology person, as a business leader who has to understand how technology works, can explain it and think about it so that you can talk to your engineering teams, talk to your IT teams, talk to your vendors in a way that they understand what is it that matters to you, what's the importance of what you're trying to do. So you need to understand enough about how to think about AI platforms and technologies to explain what is it that you're trying to accomplish with it. And so let's get into this because I think it's such an important thing to be thinking about how we actually do this. So the first things I want to do is oftentimes your department will come in, IT departments will come in and propose this is how we're going to build out AI over the next 2 years. And they're approaching it in the same way that they approach most IT problems. There is a large scale enterprise technology that needs to be put in place. We're going to execute it. This is our roadmap. Here's the plan. Here's the budget. Let's get approval for this. And the problem is that by the time you're finished rolling this out, the whole thing is going to be obsolete. So I think it's a different approach that needs to be had. And one in particular where you're thinking about things in a very different way. So the way I like to characterize this is that IT projects and most enterprise projects, we're trying to build a cathedral, this beautiful structure, well thought out, planned. It's logical, it's massive, lots of permanent structures, multi-year roadmaps, and it's going to be obsolete by the time it's done. And this is the way historically IT departments, business initiatives are planned and done. And that's great for highly complex, multi pieces moving around. You want to understand how they all fit together so that you can think about the contingencies and have those taken care of. That's not the way that it works today. And we just have too many things changing. I look at some of the agentic technologies like multi-context model context protocols, MCPs, or the ADA agents, and all the new things. We now have contextual augmented generation on top of RAG, retrieval augmented generation. So all these tools, these technologies are being built as we're trying to implement them. And so we can't take a cathedral approach, the traditional building and IT approach that we have that has served us very well in the past. Instead, I like to say that we're building with Legos. And so here's a kind of church-like culture, cathedral structure, but with Legos, it's much more modular. And so you can swap the pieces of your technology platform, of your AI platform, as things get better. And you can then adapt the system and your entire approach without having to dismantle everything and build again from scratch. And so the precedence for this is Amazon's API mandate back in 2002. Back then, Jeff Bezos wrote this sort of infamous memo that says, we are going to use application protocol interfaces. We're going to no longer like ship data from one place to another. You're going to make it all accessible to anybody who needs to use it. And it completely changed the way they operated. Everything was connected through these APIs, and it just made everything much more flexible, much more modular, and able to be, again, adapting to what you need to have done. Excuse me. And so the a similar approach to when it comes to building with AI. So the way we think about it is to assemble, don't build. So we think that the companies, and this is Katja Welsh and myself, we're finishing up our book finally, and our approach to this with AI platforms is that you want to build with components. You want to make them very, very modular, and that they can adjust alongside with the technologies. Fighting off a code here as much as I can. It's that time of year. All right. So the way we think about this is that there are four layers, and we use a kitchen analogy to understand this. And so starting from the bottom, we have the first layer being about your data. And it's like having your ingredients in a kitchen. The better the ingredients, the better the food. And so every organization has their own unique organizational knowledge that they can then use with external data sources to make sure that it's as relevant as possible to the organization. Then you have the AI models themselves. This is the equivalent of the equipment inside a commercial kitchen. So you can have different tools to do different things. You would use certain tools, for example, writing versus image generation versus video creation versus coding. So there are these general large language models like Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok. There's a whole bunch of them. But there are also these smaller models that are highly specific. Now, some of them are becoming, again, what we call multimodal. They can do different things at the same time. But in the same way, you probably wouldn't use a microwave to bake a cake. You would want to use different models to do different things. Then you have orchestration. These are like the head chef in a kitchen. They're the ones who make sure everything is working together because you have data over here, you have equipment over here, the models over here. And these are the systems that are routing the tasks and making sure that everything is operating at a very high level and quality. And we see agents doing a lot of this, and I'll go into that in greater detail. Then there's the consumption, people actually eating the food and people presenting it, the service, the people in the front of the house. And these are the digital interfaces that make AI accessible and adaptable. So these four layers are different components of your AI platform. And you can swap different pieces within those layers in and out as they get better, as you get better data, as you get better models and different models. You have different ways to change the interfaces. So we'll go into each of those layers individually just so you can see how they all work together. So let's go and talk about layer one first. This is your data layer. It is your by far the greatest asset, the thing that sets you apart. And the old approach has been, and you've probably have heard this, let's get our data house in order. Then we can do AI. Or we need to clean our data. It needs to be clean, it needs to be perfect. And in the same way that life is messy, your data will always be messy, meaning you will be constantly generating new data. You're going to get new types of data that you discover. So your data will always be messy. And the new approach is to not wait for AI to be, quote, ready. And instead, you're going to deploy AI with what data you have. So you're working in parallel, not linearly. And the reality is, AI itself can help make sense of messy, incomplete, and unstructured data. Now, the one caveat I have here is that data management, the data access, the governance around data is another aspect that people are grappling with. So, who gets access to what data to be able to do what with it? And I was speaking with an organization yesterday, and they were talking about how they wanted to have this tool that was available, like a chat tool that would allow people to access different information in their HR systems. But not everybody has access to those systems. So they needed to update the governance in order to make sure everyone had the right access. And my question to them is, why are you waiting for the access to be right before you actually build the tool? Start building the tool, testing to see if that works correctly. And yes, not everyone is going to have all the right access points from the very beginning, but at least some people will be using it and you can test it and develop it. So again, this desire to have things be perfect, be right for deployment, it doesn't work when you have such fast cycles that in the time that you're trying to get the governance in place, you can also make sure that the tool actually works in the way that you want to. And so it's setting expectations again as a leadership team, why you're deploying things this way, why some people may have access, other people don't, the shortcomings of a system that may not be operating completely up to par. So it's again a trade off that you have to make as a leader. How fast do you want to pursue these tools and make them usable and start creating value versus dealing with the fact that it is going to messy, setting expectations and putting in the guardrails in place so it doesn't have bad implications for your business. All right, let me go back to the slides and talk about the actual data itself. Again, there's no such thing as data and deploy and get things ready. Oh, this is the thing I wanted to talk about. This is about a telecom company that Katya and I were working with. And what happened was that the telecom company was trying to take some capital investments, some capital expenditures, and they wanted to uh, focus on the most congested network cells and upgrade those cells. And they only had the infrastructure data to be able to do this. And there was no consideration of customer value. So this is how they typically invested that CapEx. And then with AI, they were able to connect what we call data sources that had never, quote, met before. So they took that existing network infrastructure. They also combined it with customer value and then also the financial data of what actually those customers were creating. And the insight was that there were some high overly congested cells that were serving low value customers. And then they had some other moderately congested cells that were serving high value customers. And they realized that their investments would go a lot further if they were to serve these moderately congested cells and make them even faster, and they could serve those high value customers. And the result was 15% higher return on investment on the exact same investment that they had historically spent. So that's what AI allowed you to do, but it required that they think about the data that they were going to use from a strategic perspective, from a leadership perspective, not just from, again, that technology and data perspective. So that's just a quick example of how looking at data strategically becomes extremely important when you're using AI. So it's about not just making sure that the data is clean and perfect, again, impossible, but which data are you going to use in order to help you create the best value for what you're trying to achieve? So let's go on to layer two, which is those AI models. And their job is to make sense of the data. In the same way that kitchen equipment, their job is to make those ingredients into food. So I talked last week about why you don't need a custom model. So lots of details there. But just to draw an analogy, AI models are like electricity. In the early days, factories used to have their own power grid. They would each have their own generators. And until the power grid showed up, they would have to, again, have a reliable source of electricity. It was only if they built their own source. Now, AI is very similar to that. We don't need to build our own AI models. We have very, very powerful models that exist today. And the key here is to just plug into that grid, so to speak, and to use tools like retrieval augmented generation, RAG, to get the relevant data from your data and then combine it with the information that's in these knowledge bases. So being able to do that gives you much more accurate and relevant results versus just using a general model. And the benefit of this approach is that when you update your data and it's constantly being changed, AI instantly has access to the latest data. So there's no retraining required. And I think this is such a better approach than trying to build your own models or even do things like fine training. And there's some, again, some really nice new tools out there like contextual retrieval, contextual augmented generation, where the models are understanding not just the data, but also understanding the context of the user, that it can then go and retrieve the right data and everything. So one of the things that I do want to talk about next is orchestration, which is a very important part. You have all these different models and different data. You need somebody to organize it all. And this is like the head chef. So they're coordinating multiple models, multiple sources of data, and it's a lot of agents working together. So they may be routing the queries to the right model. They're managing multi-step processes. They're ensuring the quality, and they're making sure that there is an audit trail, that there's observability, so you can see how these models and agents are all working together and making decisions. So I wanted to show you, it just give you an example of this happening. And this is a wonderful one from McKinsey. They built their own internal AI tool called Lily. And one of the things they added to it were these agents that make it run even better and faster. And they're using this in their work. And I was just speaking to the principal there this past week, and he said they now are up to 25,000 internal AI agents. So the case example they gave me is that it would take 5 consultants 12 weeks to build a sales performance prediction model. And with an AI agent, and they had all these different agents that did very specific jobs. So, for example, they had a data scientist, they had a code interpreter, they had an engagement agent, a data analyst agent. And the result is those agents together built the same thing that 5 consultants over 12 weeks did, and the agent system did it in 3 hours. And they also did it more accurately than the human team could have. And so what we're finding is that in a single model was not going to be able to do that. But these agents working together could take very complex tasks and break them down and be able to tackle different pieces of that entire process. So the beautiful thing about these agents is and the orchestration is that you need something that looks at all of these things and orchestrates the whole process. So one of the ways to think about it, and this is a very simple one of a system in action. So there's a user, they interface with a chatbot, for example, and there's a query router agent that is saying, okay, I understand the context of what you're asking for, and I'm going to send it to and retrieve certain pieces of data. I'm going to send it to a specific model that can do this work efficiently and well. And then there's a critic afterwards, a judge kind of agent that says, is this a good quality response? And if it's not good, then it may send it back to the model and say, take a different approach. Or it may go back to the query and like, you're not understanding the context, do this again. And so once the critic is happy with this, it will send the response back to the chatbot and then give it to the user. So that's a very simplified version of what orchestration looks like. And in the past, it would just be a user talking to a chat interface, interfacing with a model, and no data, no routing or anything would be happening. And so this is how we're starting to build a platform that actually creates the value that you need to have in order to again use AI to address your business strategy. Now, I want to talk about the last layer, which is consumption. We oftentimes forget about this. This is the place where real value is created because what we're found in the research is that 70% of AI projects fail due to because people aren't using it. And if it's not being used, then people you can't use it to create value. So it's not a problem with the technology, it's a problem with the interface. And so if you have poor interfaces, then AI will be confined to a small number of people who can deal with that, typically techies. You see dozens of users rather than the hundreds or thousands, and there's limited value creation. And when you have seamless interfaces that encourage the consumption of the AI, then you have greater democratized access across your organization. It results in thousands of users in some cases if you have a very large organization. And because they're using it, they're creating so much more value. So I think that the best AI is AI that disappears into the existing workflows that you have. So just to give you an example of what that looks like, there are I believe stages of building better interfaces and consumption. The first one is something you're seeing right now, especially with tools like Microsoft's Copilot. These are tools that are embedded into the tools that people already use. So there's Salesforce using Agentforce built into the CRM. We have it built into Word. It is in the apps that we already are using. And that's fantastic because you don't have to go someplace else. The second stage is when there's self service. And basically, this is when non technical users can start building these solutions themselves. So don't need to talk to IT. They don't need to be there to support it. It results in people being able to pick up these tools and say, I have some data. I want to connect it to this chatbot, and voila, I can do that without having to talk to IT. So I think the real benefit of this is when you have things like vibe coding, that I can have these tools available so that I can create my own agents that are going to support the way that I work personally. So the stage three is when the AI just disappears. It's ambient, it's multimodal, and you can engage with it not through a keyboard, but with your voice, with vision and with gestures. And so it's as naturally in the flow of the work that you do. So again, I think a good example of this is Virgin Money's Ready Assistant. It's sort of like the embedded aspect of it, but because it's right there, you can use voice to interact with it. It's again an early version of how the interfaces are really disappearing into the experience itself. So a couple quick things that I think is really important as leadership. Again, a focus today is on how leaders can be using these tools again for and thinking about technology and making sure that your technology decisions are going to be very quick and can evolve with the technology that's changing, but also making sure it's connecting to your business strategy and your AI roadmap. And the way I think you might begin this is to go and talk to your IT teams and challenge them and say, how are we building versus assembling? Are we trying to build these cathedrals, or are we taking a modular assembly approach? Again, assemble, do not build. I do have one caveat here in that it's good to build just a little bit to be able to experiment and understand the technology. But again, you're building to learn, not building to actually implement and execute. The team I love the example from Southern New Hampshire University. I was talking to their AI lead, and they said that we build a little bit, but we build so that we are better buyers. So they build to buy and buying from vendors, buying from contractors, but the intention is not to build, but we need to understand how to build. Otherwise, they're concerned. I see this happening with many IT departments. They become procurement engines. They are there to just handle procurement, understand and sign invoices without truly understanding what does it take to build these tools. And so being able to build things, at least have the understanding of how these pieces fit together is extremely important. But again, you're assembling, not necessarily building these tools and models from scratch. And then ask your IT team, what's the state of each of these module components? What's the state of our data? How about our models? Which ones are we using? Which ones are we deciding to use? Rather, not only just the large language models, but these more specialized, maybe open source models that are doing very specific tools. How are we pulling it all together and orchestrating it? And how are we thinking about that consumption, the interfaces, to make sure adoption is happening quickly? And then also, what's our plan to be able to swap these pieces? Do we have the hooks, the APIs to make sure that the modularity can actually happen? So, just to summarize again, and I'm going to close it up for today, the takeaway I want to impress is that technology is a leadership decision. Do not leave it to your IT department. Get your hands dirty. Get into this messy business of understanding the technology. Use the model of the 4 layers to help guide that conversation with your technology teams. The second thing is don't wait for perfect data. Use the data that you already have. And you can use AI to even, quote, clean up and get that data into a shape where AI can use it. Absolutely do not build your own models unless there are very, very special, or rare circumstances where we can see people building their own large language models. And again, make it modular so that you can take the latest and best source of these technologies quickly into your AI stack and make sure that it can fit into the other components. All right. So just wanted to just share a couple of things. Again, you can get the slides there. And next week, I will be talking about the state of agentic AI. I'm a little bit nervous about this because there is so much to catch up on, but it's a forcing function for me to have a quick look at agentic AI, what's real, what isn't. 2025 was supposed to be the year of AI agents. Has that actually happened? So I would love to hear from you again about this week's content, about what are your biggest AI challenges? How are you approaching AI? And if you have examples of how you are approaching it with a modular approach, would absolutely love to hear about it. And I also would love to hear, how are you using agents? What's working for you? What agents have you tried to build? What agents have you actually deployed? What do they look like? So we'll talk a little bit about how agents are working and also how you can start getting into it yourself. So with that, I'm going to close up for today and wish you all the best in your adventures with AI technology. We're going to do a deeper dive into agents next week. And until then, take care and stay safe. See you then.